how do you do with anything that is complicated? You have to start fresh. You need a fresh canvas. You need to be putting yourself in a space where you can be back in the sandbox and everything seems limitless.
Hi guys, welcome back to the SItuAsian Room, a journey into Asian America. We dive deep into the issues in the Asian American community with questions like, where are you really from? And representation to sharing food and our own experiences. My name is Emilie Villaverde.
And I'm Zach Ging. This episode includes part 2 of our 2-part interview with Dr. Calvin D. Sun, so make sure to listen to part 1 if you haven't already. Dr. Calvin Sun is a New York City physician in emergency medicine. We discussed the coronavirus pandemic, Asian stereotypes, Calvin's path to becoming a doctor, discrimination, traveling, and more. So stay tuned. Coming up, we'll first dish it out with some Asian cuisines.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Dish It Out table. So last week, Zach and I brought some new dishes to the Dish It Out table from different cultures in, the Asian American Pacific Islander community. But for this week, we decided to bring it back home and introduce some of our favorite dishes from our own cultures. So I'll go first. This week, I decided to bring sinigang to the Dish It Out table. And I love making this. It's definitely my favorite soup out of all the Filipino soups. It's kind of like, it's a sour soup. And Zach, I don't know if you've ever had this before, but the sour taste from sinigang actually comes from tamarind.
Oh.
It's a really it's almost like a tamarind soup. It's the base.
Okay. That's a fruit, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. I know it's like a fruit. I think it grows around like the equator.
Yeah. So this is like the key component with this soup. And it has a bunch of different fixins like inside it. Typically like your protein is either pork spare ribs or salmon.
Ooh.
And then it has a lot of different vegetables. So, my family, we make it with string beans, broccoli, tomatoes, onions, and bok choy. You can also put potatoes. It makes it even heartier. And this is the best soup for when you're sick. I remember I was sick at school and, so this is the time when I didn't have a kitchen in my dorm.
Mm-hmm.
But the floor that I lived on had a communal kitchen. So I had asked my dad to send me a big pot. And he sent one down and I made sinigang. I went to Publix and I bought all the ingredients. I sat on the phone with my grandmother and she walked me through the recipe while I was like sweating out a fever. And when you're sick, this, just because like that sour component, it really it hits the spot. It's like that feel good, that comfort food. I have like a big bowl of it and I put rice in it. Some people
you can get tamarind at Publix?
No. So when I told my dad to send me the pot, he also sent me tamarind, like sinigang packets.
Gotcha. Okay. I was gonna say.
No. Unless you go to like an Asian supermarket or a Filipino supermarket, you're not gonna find that sinigang soup mix. So my dad sent it down with a big pot. And I remember just my grandmother was like, she called me so many times while I was trying to make this for the first time, just making sure that I was doing it right because she wanted me to have this soup while I was sick the same way that she prepares it for me.
Oh.
Yeah. And especially like during the winter when I'm back home in the Northeast and it's super cold, this warms you right up. It's by far my favorite soup out of all the Filipino soups that, my family makes.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I'd definitely be down to try it. For my dish, for my culture for this episode to Dish It Out, I'm going to be talking about red bean paste. Red bean paste isn't just a Chinese thing. It's very common in a lot of different East Asian cuisines, like Japanese, Korean, and usually you put it in pastries. It's like a very good filler for pastries, and sometimes I don't know if you ever tried like the fried sesame balls.
Yes.
Yeah. Now they don't always use red bean inside, but when they do, it is beautiful.
Good.
Yeah, but red bean paste is incredible. We actually have a recipe for it up on our website under Dish It Out. Yeah. And another thing I'd love to do with it is actually try to make ice cream, which is also on our website. But that's more of a Japanese thing.
That looked so good.
It was good. It came out pretty well. I've tried to make it before, and it has not worked out as well as I've wanted it to. However, this time we're getting better. But yeah, it's weird because like I was talking to my friends about it, and I have one friend who's Puerto Rican, and she was like, "That sounds disgusting. Like, why?"
Not a lot of people like it.
Yeah, well, she's associating it with like savory, like eating it as a meal, and like red bean paste is a dessert thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pastry. It's supposed to be sweet. It's sweetened with sugar, because you just cook it down with like water and sugar and like a pinch of salt, to make the paste. And so like it's very different from like one of the biggest dishes in Puerto Rico is like red beans, but it's like a completely different experience. It's more like a stew. And so that's why she was like, oh.
Yeah, a lot of people actually, when they think of red beans, they don't think of it as the dessert. They think like that's savory. Again, like a lot of like Hispanic cultures will make it into, a dish, like a savory dish. Whereas in Asian cultures, we take it and, we run with it as a dessert. I've had it in like baked into bread. Red bean buns are my favorite from the Asian supermarket when it comes just like in like the little plastic baggies. I also love it in mochi. Mochi is so good with red bean. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, but like the red beans we use in like for East Asian stuff is completely different from like the red beans you'd find like from Goya or something like that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but that was my dish for Dish It Out, and we believe that in Dish It Out that a food or a cuisine is better if you share it with someone. And so we want to hear from you, and we want to share your recipes because the AAPI community is so diverse. We have so many different types of food. And so make sure you can actually send us your recipes, and we'll try to do our best to feature it on Dish It Out, whether it's on a website or in one of our episodes.
Okay, that wraps it up for this episode's Dish It Out segment. Don't forget to check out our Dish It Out blog on our website for more recipes and clips about all the dishes that we talk about and more. But stay tuned. Coming up next, we have our topic interview for this week.
You talk about growing to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. You're not getting rid of the uncomfortable. You're just learning to embrace it. And, as an Asian American doctor, you do fit into, that stereotype, that all Asians go to become doctors or go into medicine. But I remember sitting in your workshop and you were talking about being that person that doesn't let, the stereotypes define you. And not letting those preconceived notions, take control over you. And just, I remember you talking about being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And, a little bit about me, for our listeners. Before all of this, I was a pre-med student. I entered, college pre-med thinking I was going to pursue medicine just because, it's what I talked about with my parents all my life. I talked about with my parents and different relatives, my cousins that went into medicine. That was my goal from as young as I can remember to about sophomore year of college, which was 2018, 2019. And then I came to this one conference. I sat in this workshop and, your workshop actually encouraged me to think about my own future and think, what do I really want to do with my life? And, it led me to having that discussion with my parents about medicine not being the right choice for me and how I needed to step away from these expectations. And that was by far the most uncomfortable conversation I've had with my parents. But it was also one of the most defining conversations, for my own life, because it helped me make that step. Yeah, it was uncomfortable, but it helped me make that step, closer to what I'm meant to do in life. And exactly what, doing this podcast and studying what I'm studying now at university and, applying for different jobs and graduate programs that are more based on what I'm interested in and what I'm good at, because I wasn't good at pre-med. I was terrible at STEM. But it's just, I love hearing that one line, like embracing the uncomfortable and being comfortable with it. But, one thing that I do have to ask is, how do we avoid, those voices and expectations that try to push us into narrow narratives like stereotypes and, try and find that effort to discover our true selves?
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I want to apologize to the rest of the world that we have now one fewer doctor. Kidding. No, I'm so happy for you. And I think what you said earlier in our pre interview would resonate with me, is that you weren't sure whether you wanted it or you wanted it. And that was just like, for me, like, oh, I said that, or I made you feel that way, or something where it's just like, I'm glad to be on that spectrum of, on that statement, because it does put in perspective. It's just something that I'm going to keep. If I had said that at the time in Orlando, then wow, maybe I was super underslept and I don't remember. But if you had just said that and didn't say I had said that in Orlando, I'd be like, that's awesome. I'm going to take that, if you don't mind, and put it in my pocket, because I really like that idea, is that a lot of people are not even sure what they truly want. And it's because they've been so distracted from everything else. So a lot of people think that they want something, but it's actually they want something. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to parse that out. Now, even listening to that statement, it's like complicated. It's like, how do I, differentiate that? And to answer your question about to ignore all those voices that says, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, you want it, or you want it, or I don't know, is you have to, how do you do with anything that is complicated? You have to start fresh. You need a fresh canvas. You need to be putting yourself in a space where you can be back in the sandbox and everything seems limitless. No, but that's very difficult if you're constantly inundated with stimuli from your parents, your guardians, the people who are assigning tests and exams and homework to you, or the next job-related task that you have to do, or it's even social media, what as people are posting on Instagram, Facebook. I certainly don't help with my social media by giving all that stimuli, but it's truly a test for you. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing because it's something I enjoy doing. Your guardians, your parents are not going to stop doing what they're doing because it's their job to protect you. I actually will be very worried if the people on my trips didn't tell me my mom doesn't want me to go. I really am worried if somebody doesn't complain that their mom is not letting them go on the trip, because mom's supposed to get worried when they come on a trip like mine. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. But it's a test. It's for you to really know for sure whether you have it in you to start fresh and all over again, and to and put yourself, or to create that space where you can decide what's truly yours and what's somebody else is telling you to do. And that space can look different for many different people. And it's on you. You have to own it. No one can say, hey, you should go do yoga, and then you do yoga and you realize that you're doing yoga for the other person, and then you then get yourself in this mess again. You have to want it, and you have to own, and the thing that you want is something that you have to own. So what that could look like could be going to the gym, or hardcore meditation, or yoga, or just waiting for the next trauma. Some people just don't want to do the uncomfortable thing and start new, and they're just, not to say lazy, but they're just not in that place to take the initiative, and they're waiting for the next trauma to turn their life upside down so they start all over again and unlearn those habits, or break those old habits. And that's like waiting for a breakup, or waiting for a death of a loved one or family, none of which I want for you. I don't wish trauma for anyone. So for me, I had to figure out something that was sustainable and felt like trauma, but wasn't, didn't involve hurting other people, having people get hurt. So that was travel. Travel is a form of controlled trauma that's fun. It's something that's within my control. I can chase after, I can initiate anytime I want. And it's something that people look forward to. People love traveling. But it's also traumatic in that at least how you travel is, you can go to a place where you don't know anyone, nobody knows you, you don't speak the language, and you have to start all over again, where even like finding a place to sleep, or where to eat is a challenge. And that's kind of traumatic. That's like after the worst breakup of your life, you also start wondering, where do I sleep tonight? Or where do I eat? Things don't taste the same anymore. You're so miserable. But that's what trauma does. It just completely turns your world upside down, so you get to start all over again. at least that's how I reframe trauma, is you get to start all over again, unlearn all your habits, and start fresh and try to figure out what's really yours and what other people will tell you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. That really does, you know, help with, we do have, some listeners, and I mean, I can even speak from my own experience that, we want, like, it's just different things in life that we think we want to pursue. And, maybe we struggle with taking that first step, or maybe it's just, we're still on the fence and we don't know, is this what I'm meant to do, or do I just want to think that?
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us that input.
And I think just an addendum to that, it's not about what you do, but how you do it. That addresses the whole mental health question you had asked earlier, the Asian American doctor stereotype that I'm fulfilling, as you asked earlier, the how to create that space. It's not about what you do, it's how you do it. So the what is, I became a doctor. The what is, I signed up for a gym. I signed up, I'm starting to travel. The what is, I'm seeking a counselor. That's the what. It's not going to mean jack shit to you or anyone if it ends up being not the right counselor, or I became a boring Asian doctor who studied all the time and never traveled, a single country during my 4 years of med school or 4 years of residency. No stories to look back on. Or, I signed up for a gym and I didn't go at all. Or I went once a month for 10 minutes and then took a photo of me in the mirror. Or I traveled. Calvin told me to travel. I said, how though? Did you go to a resort and you just sat there and ordered pina coladas the whole time? Then you learned nothing. Or did you go backpacking alone and knew nobody, and nobody knew you, and you had to figure it out all yourself, and you missed the train, and you have to figure out what to do after the fact? It's all about how. You have to find the right counselor. If you go into the counselor often enough to talk about these things, or it's not about even seeking help. It's how you seek help. Maybe you don't talk. Maybe you find a way to punch a pillow the whole time. You sign up for a boxing gym. I became a doctor. That's not about what. I'm not your typical Asian American doctor. I lost a bet, and I traveled to 150 countries during that time. I have so many stories to go back on in my journey to become a doctor. It had nothing to do with, did I even tell you a medical story yet? No. But it's a very integral part of my medical journey, how I became a doctor. It's this thing, like, my life looks like this, or it can look like this. Either way, you still get to the same point. And the same thing with travel. It's not about the destination. It's the journey that matters. How did you get there? Did you fly a private jet getting there? Then, great. Tell me about that story. Or did you miss 3 trains, met the love of your life, never saw her again, and you adopted a puppy, the puppy ran away, and, and you sat next to a guru on an airplane, and then you made an emergency landing somewhere, and then you ended up, hitchhiked over, and then you got to the same thing. I swear that the latter person is going to be the cooler person at the party than the one that took the private jet.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I know you said that you haven't mentioned a medical story yet. One thing that we wanted to talk about with you, being a doctor in New York, being an Asian American, period, in New York, have you experienced, any discrimination from people frustrated with the pandemic? One thing that Zach and I, we asked each other was, and we wanted to ask you, what's it like being celebrated as a frontline healthcare professional, but at the same time, have you gotten that backlash from, being a person of Asian descent?
I have to preface this is that it does exist. Anti-Asian racism, verbal and physical, does exist, and they're all should be heard and addressed, and that there's institutionalized form of racism that's existed for Asian Americans and all people of color since the dawn of this country, way before a pandemic. There was a pandemic before a pandemic. Now, personally, you're going to ask me personally, as what I've experienced, I have the privilege of being a 6'1", cisgendered, heterosexual, alpha New Yorker man who has learned a little bit of charm through the 150 countries I've been to in the last 10 years. 190. Who's counting? And able to talk my way out of anything, just simply by my learned life experience as a bartender. And that I guess, privilege creates an aura or an attitude or just self-defense mechanism. I don't know how you want to call it, whatever you label it as, but it's a very high deterrent for anyone who wants to say anything negative to me about being Asian American. I've never had it, never experienced it, except for one time where the patient was going to say it to anyone anyway. I think I have COVID-19. I know I feel good, but I think I need you to test me because I saw an Asian person sneeze from across the room to me, and then felt awkward because they found out that through the PPE I was an Asian American. To which I responded, why did you think you got it? Was this person like next to you? Were you making out with this person? Because across the room sounds very far away, more than 6 feet. And the wife says, I am so sorry. You were hilarious. Very charming, but I'm sorry for my husband. He's kind of old school. We should go. And I was like, yeah, because you're not wearing what I'm, and I know we talk the whole PP. It's like, are you wearing what I'm wearing? Because if you're not, then you're more likely to catch COVID-19. It's April, everyone has it. And I'm wearing my bunny suit and you're not. So maybe it's safer for you to get out of here instead of waiting for a test that will take 2 days to result anyway. And they actually were like, no, you're totally right. And they politely excused themselves and they walked out and got discharged. And they're still alive, to my knowledge, I think. Yeah, I think they're still alive. And so, I mean, everything worked out. Nobody got hurt, learned his lesson. They actually, the wife and the husband apologized before I even said anything through that humorous statement. And I think they learned on their own and they own it and they own the knowledge and they're still alive, which is great. So it was a win-win situation that could have turned pretty badly. And it's not about what you do, it's how you do it. I addressed the racism. I did it in a way that I felt worked for me. I'm not saying that this is working for everyone, that if you're not a funny person, don't try to be funny. You know, that's go same with the interview. You know, if you're not someone that is comfortable with addressing it with a humorous statement, or you're not that type of person, that's fine. You have to find your own voice. But that was the only experience I had. And I'm very lucky to have that. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It does happen. All my friends who do not have the privilege of being a 6'1", you know, New Yorker, alpha, cisgender, heterosexual man, have been harassed, have been assaulted physically. These are my friends and their stories should be told. I don't want to speak for them because I didn't experience what they went through, but definitely seek them out because their stories need to be heard, and definitely not from my point of view, which, you know, I'm walking around, people look at me and they're like, nah, not worth it. I remember in high school after my growth spurt where like we were getting mugged and the guy literally went down the line of friends that I was hanging out with, 3 or 4. And then once it was my turn, he was like, nah, it's not worth it. And he walked away. I was really offended. He didn't want to mug me. He didn't want my money. He said he loved Asians. So I don't know, racist love. It's problematic still, but I didn't get mugged. So that's my experience, but by no means should my experience be applied to the general population.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I do agree with you that it's different for every, you know, AAPI, you know, dealing with, you know, acts of racism or, you know, just the backlash from this pandemic. I know that your experiences and, you know, you being 6'1", like alpha male, like that won't work on me, who's 5'2", Filipino American, very small, very shy, very quiet. It's very different, and it does, you know, depend on each individual.
Yeah.
But, you know, the AAPI community has been making a lot of progress. But, you know, with the resurgence of discrimination, especially with the pandemic, do you see this as a setback that we can, you know, one day come back from? And, you know, if we can, how, you know, what's the first step that we have to take?
Getting punched in the face has been the story of our existence. We always got punched in the face. We got interned in camps, in concentration camps. We got excluded from even coming to this country. We're still like legally the only race, or I don't believe in race. Race is a social contract. The only identity that has been barred from entering this country. It's like we've been through a lot of shit. Like every other person of color. I mean, we definitely don't, I mean, it's different, but it's also, we definitely don't have it bad as our Black and brown, you know, brethren out there who've been through even worse trauma in a way that, you know, that a lot of us cannot relate to as Asian American. It's different as well, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I think we all need to work together on different avenues and different spheres of privilege to help one another, because being punched in the face just for being different has been the storyline of our existences. And your second question is, will we bounce back from it? Yeah, we were interned, we were excluded, and then we got the model minority myth, which is not a good thing in itself either, because it caused a lot of issues with mental health and pressures that things want to do. Well, that's another conversation. But we were given privilege. The society, the status quo institution decided to pick a race to give all this privilege to, and they picked Asian Americans, and they, send us to school and everything. And, but then there was, they're creating a race war right now by saying they're a minority, everyone should look up to them. And they're like, well, they got their rights through the backs and shoulders of the civil rights movement. So, and then there's a lot of us who are a little more aware and say, like, we should help one another out. We should be grateful. But there's also a complex dialogue in that itself, where it's not just as simple as, oh, we should help them because they helped us. That's also a problematic statement too. Mm-hmm. We should be helping them regardless if the civil rights movement helped us or not. And I'm being very meta, but like, this is the circular firing squad that the status quo wants. Mm-hmm. That is how they maintain their power, by dividing and conquering us, by making us all, castigate each other for the right activism, the wrong activism, for doing the right way, for doing the wrong way. We should be doing this way. We should be doing that way. And people, instead of, fighting against oppression together, we're fighting each other and what the right way of fighting is. We need them all. We need all of us to work together. I really compare that to Star Wars Rogue One, the guy who designed the Death Star. Everybody wanted to kill him. The rebellion wanted to kill him because they thought he was making a super weapon. His daughter wanted to kill him for abandoning her. The Empire didn't trust him because he showed that he was sympathetic to rebel cause, but he was the only one who knew how to design it. And he was a guy who designed that little easy weakness in the Death Star for them to destroy in the original movies. Everyone's like, how did it take one starfighter to destroy the Death Star? That's a story, that he was actually the good guy, but he did it even though everyone hated him. And that was it. Everyone had to. They could have worked it out if everyone worked together, but it's a Hollywood drama movie, so you have to have some conflict. But it's literally playing out right now. We're not working together as much as we should, because Asian Americans, have been through so much, and yet we're still getting punched in the face all the time because everyone thinks like, have different views of our, experiences of racism.
Yeah. I actually want to talk to you about your views with, this next topic. There's been a lot of discussion about the names that we give viruses to justify names like the Chinese virus, or the Kung flu to describe the coronavirus. Many people are just justifying these names by pointing to examples like, oh, we called it the Spanish flu. But we've seen, the impact that it has on so many different communities just by giving names of, groups of people, names of countries to these viruses. From your own experience, what impact do you think these names have on both, the medical community and the AAPI community?
Oh, I think it's very problematic to be even calling it anything like racial flu, insert race, ethnicity flu. But I'm also rested in that the narrative, the arc, at least in my experience, I think the history will still call it COVID-19 and coronavirus. Like, I think that's where we're leading toward. The big picture, you're not going to open the history book and see, hopefully, I'm not even going to say it because it doesn't even deserve attention. And that's the point. It's that delicate balance. I really do believe any act of racism, any spoken racism needs to be addressed, because people need to know that's not okay every time it happens, to the point that the oppressors who are using that language gets exhausted. Finally, you know how we feel getting exhausted as people of color? It's time for you to feel exhausted. Everyone calls you. And to the point, they're just like, it's not even worth it. And then, but that's that balance between that and also not giving it too much attention. Not even like giving the attention, it doesn't deserve it. It's not worth it. Because I really think, a long enough timeline, people are going to remember it as COVID-19 and coronavirus. And they're going to forget about what other people are calling it, whatever that is. I'm glad it's not sticking it like the Spanish flu, because it wasn't the Spanish flu. It was actually America and Europe, the rest of Europe in World War I. It's only called the Spanish flu because only Spain had freedom of press during World War I to report on flu numbers and deaths, where everyone else was hiding it. Yeah, we've been through this before. That sounds familiar, right? 1918. Some things don't change. And I think luckily for Asian Americans now, it doesn't mean that we should rest on our laurels. We should still address it and be aggressive pushing back on it, while also not giving too much attention so that sticks. it's that dance. Figure out your dance. And I think it's a little better in that it's not going to stick, and we're going to remember it as COVID-19 and coronavirus.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I had those fears of, certain nicknames or like different names sticking to this pandemic other than, COVID-19 and the coronavirus, especially because there's a lot of damage that, that can happen by giving different viruses, different pandemics, names tied with groups of people, races, just like insert this ethnicity here, space virus, I know that was like one of my concerns, just hearing that. I remember hearing that, and I agree with you. I'm not going to say it just because it doesn't deserve, that to have any voice. But I did hear it at one point, and I was concerned. I remember thinking, what is this going to do for, people like me, people in the AAPI community? How is this going to impact us negatively, moving forward?
I just laugh at them, and it's like, if this is the hill that they want to die on, when there are so many more like issues out there to be concerned about, and they really want to say something racist to make them feel better, I just feel bad for them. They're the lonely ones. They're the ones in the minority, and they know it's not going to stick. It's not working. The mainstream media is not picking it up. In fact, they're calling them out on it or not giving it attention. It's this dance is working. So I just kind of feel bad for them. They must be very lonely. If this is, the only thing that gets them going. I don't know. That's what I want to see. Like Brad Pitt from Troy says, that's why history will never remember you. Yeah, they're just dirt. They're not gonna be. Why not? Why are we thinking about them? I got bigger fish to fry. Mm-hmm. Like, people who are listening to this who are using that term. I was like, I go to work and I save lives, and I'm grateful for doing so. And then if I'm not, I'm taking people traveling around the world. What are you doing?
Yeah. So, looking to the future, as someone who is in the trenches fighting this pandemic, you've seen the worst of it, and your job on the front line is to help, shovel our way out of this hole. And so what needs to happen for us to prevent us from falling back into this hole? Because as we see right now in July, a lot of the places, Miami was just named an epicenter a few hours ago for the COVID-19 pandemic. And so what can we do to prevent ourselves from falling back in the hole?
Nothing. Really nothing. You're going to go back in this hole over and over and over again. History is doomed to repeat itself. It's just human nature. We were in this hole. It's called the 1918 Spanish flu. We had HIV/AIDS. We still haven't have a vaccine for HIV and AIDS. Mm-hmm. H1N1, SARS, these things happen over and over again. I mean, the best thing to do is minimize and negate the next time it happens. But right now, the people who are getting infected, they're infected. There's no cure. There's no vaccine. We spent 3 months in New York City eating shit. All right? Telling and warning the rest of the country. Eating shit. And we gave them enough time. 3 months. We gave you 3 months. And we're reading reports that's giving us deja vu all over again. And we're chilling out now in New York City, eating outdoor dining, which is the way dining is supposed to be anyway. I love outdoor. And you give me a choice. Do you want to eat outside or inside? I'll never choose to eat inside if you give me that choice. I always eat outside way before a pandemic. So now we are forced to. Great. And the prevalence rate are still less than 1%. We had our protests, mass protests every day ever since May 28th. And they're still going on. And our rates have still been nearly zero. So it's definitely not the protest. So we kind of proved our point. I think I did my activism by kind of low-key just telling the world that this is not the protest. Don't go indoors. That's it. Protests are fine. And not, being a street medic and watching all the protesters become even more responsible for masking up than the picnickers in Central Park who, since April have been outside, and their rates haven't been skyrocketed. New York is now open, right? And this is after 3 months of hell. And I don't understand why even showing people why staying the fuck home, hashtag staying the whole fuck home, and wearing face coverings, and coming from a city where if you don't wear a face covering, the culture is to tell them, put your fucking mask on. And the response in New York is usually, fuck you, fuck off, but you're right. I've heard that many times. It's like, you're right. Thanks, man. But fuck off. Fuck you back. Okay, great. That's New York. we put on a mask. It's not about what you do, it's how you do it. And we're all team players. And I think that makes a huge difference in keeping the rates low, despite people out since April, but despite daily mass protest gatherings, whatever you want to call it, rallies since May 28th. I don't call them riots because they're not, we're not riots. They're super peaceful. I've been in a lot of protests. They're the most peaceful I've ever been through. As a street medic, it just shows that you can have your cake and eat it too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just, all those things happened where we're moving the arc of progress towards justice, at the same time beating back this pandemic, at the same time keeping our rates low, even into July, at the same time opening up everything, and everyone's outdoor dining anyway. And we have all the space in the world to do so because tourism and travel is kind of not right anymore. No, there's no international travelers coming in from, you know, Europe or Asia into New York because of the pandemic. So we are able to have our cake and eat it too. That's like the story we're able to show you. And yet, despite all of that, Florida, Arizona, Texas are just about to start their death spikes. California is going back and forth in this dimmer switch thing that they're calling it. In New York, like, we still have a circuit breaker in place. We don't call it that's another thing. We're doomed to repeat this all over again. We're never going to get out of this because California, which is have really high rates right now, has had high rates, is calling it a dimmer switch when things get bad. In New York, we don't fuck around. We call it a circuit breaker. If our rates go high, we break the circuits and we shut down immediately. And I know there are some pockets of people who are like, no, that's not right, they're tyrants. But like, most of New York City is like, yeah, that's a good point. Because somebody knows somebody in New York City that has died. We get it because you told us the truth. Now, the reason why I think it's more encouraging for New York, I'm a little biased because I'm a New Yorker. If you tell New Yorkers why you should do something before you tell them to do something, we'll do it. But if you had told New Yorkers, shut down because it's a pandemic, and that's it, you don't tell us the truth of why, what the numbers and whatever, how you do it, we'll be like, why should I? But you didn't. The way that New York was done, and there's still people who protested it, but my majority of us was explained fully with the numbers, with the figures, the people started dying, and it correlated with our own lived experience. Somebody finally knew someone who died. Then all of us, when you shut down our city, all of us was like, yep, that's a great idea. And I'm not going to make your life a living hell out of it. And when we went out to rallies and protested, everyone really wore a mask. And we did so knowing that for 2 months, people were already out anyway, picnicking Central Park and not getting infected and not increasing the rates. So we did it responsibly. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't want to like start your answer with something discouraging, like, oh, we're never going to get out of it, because New York at least shows that you can. But I would think that the second wave will happen just because that's life. There's always going to be a trauma. So it's maybe not COVID. Maybe it'll be like Ebola ×2, God forbid, but you never know. Or it's flu season. I really think it's mid-October flu season where the symptoms are exactly the same. People are going to come in thinking it's COVID because, you know, you should assume the worst for anything when you deal with life and death, just to be safe. But then coming in and they're going to give COVID to other people or get COVID from someone who actually does have COVID when it's actually the flu. And we know you can be co-infected with flu and COVID at the same time. So is this going to be a shit show? Unless, and you can prevent this, we can, you asked that question, how do we get in the complete clear? Is 100% of people get vaccinated for the flu? I know that's not going to happen. I'm going to say 100% because the goal is 90% or 70%. Just shoot for gold. Always aim for the A+. That's very Asian of me saying that, but like, yeah, that's always goal for gold. Do the best because at least you know you did your best. Everyone gets vaccinated for the flu, so we don't have to worry about that because the flu vaccine, at least, is not great at preventing you from getting the flu, but it decreases your chances of dying and lowers your symptoms. So that threshold of I feel so bad, I'm gonna go to the emergency room, is not met as often if you have the flu vaccine in you. You will probably get it still. It's not very good at preventing you from getting it, but it lowers your chances of dying. So you don't overrun our emergency rooms and we only see COVID patients still. We don't want you to catch COVID and the flu and flu A. And there's also flu A, there's flu B, there's like 10 different coronaviruses, H1N1. That's all still possible. And you don't want to get that when the weather's colder and everyone's back inside. Yeah.
So to switch gears really quickly, as the founder of a travel company, Monsoon Diaries, and you mentioned it briefly. How has travel really been affected by COVID-19? How do you see it coming back in the future? And I know you recently took a trip, during the pandemic. So if you want want to elaborate on how your trip was and how that was affected by COVID.
Yeah, travel's completely changed forever. I think for a very, very long time. But just like 9/11, takes a few years. And that's the same thing with like my answer on New York with 9/11. New Yorkers come together after tragedies, and we know what it's like to overcome like hardship, Sandy, financial crisis, and it's same with travel. A natural disaster, financial crisis, 9/11. We will always come back, but it'll take a long time. I think a vaccine is a game changer. I can't predict the future. A lot of people say, oh, once we get a vaccine, but I was like, well, we never designed a vaccine like that before. We don't know if it's even going to work. I hope it does. I'm going to sign up for it, as I already have 42 vaccines in my blood, so I might as well add another one. I think all of that will be encouraging for people to say, yes, you know what? I don't care if it works. Once you get the vaccine, that's enough for travel, because we just need to show, liability wise that we took, care. And that was the best way to only take people who've been vaccinated. So that's a possibility of coming back by 2021, if a vaccine's available by then. If it's not, or if it doesn't work, it's going to be a couple of years, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, when people just going to accept it as normal. Just like what happened after the 1918 Spanish flu, people just gave up and just wiped out everyone. And that's the concept of herd immunity, is that that's the other possibility of happening. The vaccine gets you to herd immunity faster without killing as many people. Because the whole idea of herd immunity is that at least 70%, it's a mathematical number. It's 70, 80% of the population, depending on the population, but it's at least 60, more than half, needs to have antibodies. Doesn't mean they have to die or get sick. They just have to have antibodies. And the vaccine is like the cheat code that gets you all the way there without killing anyone. But if you don't have a vaccine, you have to infect everyone to have everyone have the antibodies. But also that means everyone has to die off. Like everyone, meaning like a million, 2 million people for the country of the United States of America. Everyone's like, oh, that's just so little, 1 out of 360. I'm like, seriously, 1 million people dying? Like, just fathom that. Just fathom 1 million people dying in the course of a year. That's more than most wars that we have. And do you even want that in your conscience? You're going to have survivor's guilt for the rest of your life, that I survived the pandemic and I supported the concept of me telling my grandmother, thank you for your sacrifice. I dare you to tell your mom and dad, thank you for your sacrifice so I could travel. Right? It's the whole, and I was like, why does it do with travel? Because it's not about what you do, it's how you do it. I don't want to travel, and I'll feel guilty traveling if I'm going through a world where I was responsible for killing the person sitting next to me, or that somebody had to sacrifice themselves so that I could be here right now. That's not right. It has to get to a point where I want to travel responsibly. So that's why I did a road trip first. I didn't get on a flight to Germany. I could, right? Germany saying, hey, New Yorkers can come, not Americans, New Yorkers. I know probably people who've already flown to Switzerland or other places, self-quarantine or, travel. I'm not going to do that. I want to do it responsibly, which is why I did a road trip through New England. The rates are low. The culture is good on face coverings, and they're much more responsible after seeing what happened in their neighbor, New York. And then next step is a cross-country road trip across America in small cohorted groups of people that I know very well or know each other very well, who have either self-quarantined before the trip or have antibodies or have been telling me their daily medical history, so I can cohort them in the appropriate groups. And if that works out, then I may feel comfortable and responsible to do a quick airplane trip somewhere. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But that's what travel is going to look like. Small groups, step by step, baby steps. And that's the way I like to see it. Other people may disagree, and they're just going to jump in on the first transatlantic flight once this is all over. And I say, well, good luck, because then you're the one bringing back that whatever this new flu that's happening in China right now. And those of you listening are like, what the fuck? Yes, there's a new flu with pandemic potential building up in China. So we should be a little careful opening up back again.
Well, thank you again for, taking the time to meet with us and talk to us about everything from your experiences to, talking about what you think about, in terms of coronavirus and the AAPI community. But before we let you go, Calvin,
I have plenty of time.
Before we let you go, here in the SItuAsian Room, we have questions prepared for every interviewee that speaks with us. Yeah, so the first question that I have for you is, what does it mean to be AAPI?
It depends. Well, for me, Being an Asian American is this idea of learning how to unlearn everything you've ever been taught and been socialized by what society has said you should be as an Asian American, and building for yourself your own true identity. And through that process, and some would call that an identity crisis, I think it's a rite of passage for you to become your own person and choosing willingly of your own accord the identity of Asian American after that kind of journey. And if you want to be a team player and consider yourself an Asian American as part of this group, then I want and I invite you to join this league of badasses of people who all can share one thing in common, is that we went through identity crisis, figuring out who we are, what we are, why we are. And we all have our different versions and definitions of it, but we all come together and willingly take up the mantle of saying proudly that I'm an Asian American.
Thank you. That's an awesome answer. And so, and our next question is, food is often a bridge between people and a wonderful way to share one's culture with someone else. And so we want to know, what is your favorite Asian dish?
I eat everything. I don't discriminate with food, let alone Asian food. You go to my swarm, or what it was, Foursquare before, and you see all the places I've checked in. I think I'm at like 19,000 check-ins. It's like, I guess I'll tell you then, because that's by statistic, because I can't choose favorites.
What's something that you really like?
And then the number one right now is like Japanese restaurants and Korean restaurants, kind of like jockeying from number 1 and 2. And the third is like, legit Chinese restaurants. Mm-hmm. But those are much harder to find and check in because there's just an abundance of, Americanized Chinese food. But yeah, Japanese, Korean. So it depends on my mood. I will always go for the Chinese house lobster sauce, or the Chinese lobster and house sauce. I love that Chinese lobster. But what I eat more often, because that's very hard to find as often in a lot of shops, is usually a sushi omakase, good value, or Korean barbecue, usually kalbi marinated, and anything that's unique. So I would, I don't discriminate. So if at a Filipino restaurant, I'll eat balut, or I'll use a kamayan feast. I'll eat with my hands the way it's supposed to be done. Yes. Or if I'm in, like a Thai restaurant, I better get Northern Thai food that's like legit spicy. I'm crying and I'm not enjoying the experience. That's the way it's supposed to be done. Or Szechuan, I better have something that I cannot feel my mouth, because the mala is, dialed up to 100. It has to be like genuine. I got a lot of love in it, but I don't discriminate any specific dish. I do find myself just always picking the lobster if I have the money for it.
I love that. And yeah, honestly, our past guests always have the same answer with, I can't pick.
Yeah.
Like, it's so difficult, but I'm glad that you gave us, a couple of options. I definitely need to try.
Yeah, I'm not that political. I'm not going to just give a political answer. Like, I like everything. No, I'm going to be very, I do have favorites, but
I definitely have to try that lobster. I've never.
Come to New York. I'll take you. There is now finally a new restaurant in New York that does like these dishes that are very genuine, authentic, but isn't like, Chinatown. It's like, hip and accessible in a neighborhood that's easy to get to, rather than like a 3-hour subway ride in a 10 or it needs a car. I'm a New Yorker. I need a car to get some of my favorite places. Mm-hmm. So they're actually popping up in like East Village and Lower East Side and Upper East Side, and they're authentic. That's the important part. Like, white people will walk in and be like, oh, this is the real deal. And no one's bending over backwards for them, because we're, it's genuine Asian Americans who cook really well, who love cooking authentic food and not having to bend over backwards for anyone. And it's legit. And people are actually paying money for the real thing.
I love that.
The weird looking lobster, the thing that looks alive, the thing that's like, it's being embraced right now. We're the new hip thing. So I am encouraged by that. And it's kind of like meeting a girl that has an Asian fetish. It's like, I guess that's progress, but it's like also like, oh, I just been treated as a fat. I'm still an objectified fat. It's like overall still kind of icky. Politics is complicated. Progress is complicated, but it's, I'll take what I can get for now, and we'll fine tune things as they come.
For sure. The next question I have is, who would you consider to be, your AAPI role model?
There's so many, but the person that I've met, I want to choose someone I met personally. And it all started with my Better Luck Tomorrow experience. That's what got me becoming an Asian American activist when I was 15 years old, and I accidentally organized the red carpet premiere of Better Luck Tomorrow in New York City. Just accidentally meaning like I just wanted to take my friends, the Asian Appreciation Club at Trinity. I went to high school, my high school Asian club, to go watch it, and ended up bringing 600 people. It's kind of like what happened with Monsoon Diaries. I wanted to travel alone as a solo travel blog, and just like Forrest Gump, I turned around after like 6 years, and like thousands of people have been on my trip, or like met me at the airport. So it's kind of like this, like, hey, I was going to bring a bunch of friends to watch this, and 600 people showed up. Oops. And that was because I never accidentally organized it. I got to meet Justin Lin, the director of Better Luck Tomorrow, who went on to direct all the Fast and the Furious, pretty much all the Fast and the Furious movies, and Star Trek. And he brought along Justin Lin. Yeah, he came up to me. He's like, dude, thanks. Yeah, he was kind of thoughtful. He's like, yo, this is cool, man. Like, you know, how old are you? You know, it's like, thanks for setting this up. But like, we were wondering how old are you, because like, you have like, I don't know, the puberty voice. Oh, I was walking, you know. I was 15. So I told him the truth. I'm 15. After my growth spurt, the time where, you know, you can try to mug me, but feel intimidated. And he brought Sung Kang. And reason why I'm inspired by those two, and Paris Shen was there, the whole cast. And they actually paid me back. It's like a family, because 4 years later, I was a senior in college. Mm-hmm. And they emailed me back. I was like, oh, where are you going? Where are you going to college? Like, oh, I'm in Columbia. You know, on my way out as a senior, president of the Asian American Alliance. Great to hear from you. Would you like to come? I was like, actually, we actually emailed you just because we want to pay you back. Can we show up for free? You don't have to pay for any celebrities, blah, 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 blah. We'll just show up and you can make an event around us. They were there to promote a movie. But, you know, the fact that they remembered me, it was a win-win. I got a free event out of it. People showed up because they all wanted to meet. At that time, like, they were big. Sung Kang was already like an international superstar for being Han from Fast and Furious 3 and Fast 5. Yeah, it was a packed audience. So it's great because it's like a small family. And they even had a blog for Asian Americans called You Offend Me, You Offend My Family, that speaks to, like, you know, once you get there, as an Asian American, don't forget your roots and who got you there. And that's what they did, even though, you know, it was a win-win compromise. Helen Zia, met her while working with Ikasu. I got to speak right before her. So I am, you know, she's a legend. And anyone who watched the PBS documentary or who killed Vincent Chin knows that she's the one who started it all, or was part of it.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. So our last question for you is, how can people connect with you?
Any way you want. You can connect with me through Facebook, facebook.com/my name, Calvin D. Sun. D is my middle initial. You can also use Instagram. Everything else is Monsoon Diaries. So it would be Instagram. The handle is Monsoon Diaries, MONSOONDIARIES. So Motorcycle Diaries plus Monsoon Wedding together. The Monsoon Diaries on Instagram, Monsoon Diaries on Facebook as well. You can reach me there, monsoondiaries.com. Monsoon Diaries on Twitter. I don't use that as much. Or you can just email me. And if you follow me, anytime you're near the New York City area, you can literally just find me where I'm posting, sit down next to me and chat, because I do have these like public spaces where I work and invite people to come and, you know, give me company. So I'm very accessible, and I'm happy to, you know, keep the conversation going, because ultimately what changes from a podcast like this or any speaking engagement is that you probably felt something during this podcast and it was listening. But what matters isn't that feeling that you have. That's an emotional thing, right? You're going to remember that feeling. You're not going to remember anything I say tomorrow, probably. You're going to wake up tomorrow morning after you listen to this and you'll be like, what did he just say? But you did feel something. The only way that actually means anything is that you capitalize on that feeling and you turn into a momentum and keep in touch. So whether that's keep in touch with any of you or myself, I'm happy to be part of that conversation.
Definitely. Thank you again to Dr. Calvin Sun for taking the time to join us in the SItuAsian Room. And thank you for, you know, your time and service as a frontliner and, you know, working towards defeating this pandemic. I know it's a lot, and, you know, there are days where you don't really get as much credit. So I just want to take the time on this show to say thank you for all of your work. If you guys are interested in anything that was mentioned during this interview, definitely check out our show notes for this episode on our website, www.SItuAsianRoom.com. That's SITUAsianRoom.com.
Thank you again to Dr. Calvin Sun for coming into the SItuAsian Room, and thank you all for tuning into this episode for our second and final part of our interview with Dr. Calvin Sun. The SItuAsian Room is produced by Crimson Planet Media. Make sure to check out our website, SItuAsianRoom.com, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook at the SItuAsian Room for more content.
Yes, and as always, we want to hear from you guys. So send us messages and recipes through our website. Hit us up on Instagram and Facebook. Let us know what you want us to talk about in the SItuAsian Room. But for now, thank you again for joining us on this step of our journey through Asian America. My name is Emilie Villaverde.
And I'm Zach King.
Zach, same time next week.
Yep. Gotta do something new.
Yes. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. Bye.
Yay!
Good job.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.